Roles, responsibilities and skills of a coach. The first role of a coach I'll be speaking about is as a friend. If a friend is a coach, it could be a positive for the player because they could be trustworthy, respectful and supportive of the player. The coach could work with a team better if they know the players well, because they could help them out with whatever they need help with outside of the sport, and therefore be more supportive in the sport by understanding what the performer was going through. For example, maybe the point guard of the coach's basketball team gets nervous before every game. The coach could take 5 minutes before every game and make sure they are okay. A friendly coach would be better for younger children, because if the young children know the coach, they'll be more likely to do what they want, and they might be able to relate to them more. If the coach of the children's football team is friendly towards them, it would motivate the children instead of making them bored and losing interest in the sport or training. The negative effects of being a coach and a friend is that the performer might be thinking they don't have to work as hard just because they know the coach well. For example, a sprinter might have to do 10 reps of a 100-meter sprint, but only complete 8 of them because they feel like they can get away with it. Another negative effect of having a friend as a coach is that the coach might be biased towards the player. For example, if it was a basketball game, the coach could give the player more minutes because they are friends. However, this could then separate the team because the rest of the team might not believe that this certain performer should get those minutes. Although the coach could be biased towards the player, there could also be an argument if the coach isn't being biased towards the player. For example, in a football tryout, the performer might not make the team that the coach is coaching and then take it personally that the coach didn't pick them. Finally, the other negative effect the coach being a performer's friend might be is that the coach might feel hesitant when criticising the player because they are friends, and then the player won't be able to learn from their mistakes and improve upon what they are doing wrong. The second role of a coach I'll be talking about is if the coach is also a role model. A role model is someone who others aspire to be like for one reason or another, and they should be responsible and set a good demonstration for the people that look up to them. The coach could be an ex-professional or could just be experienced, and the performers could look up to this. The role has both positive and negative effects. The positive effects that the coach could be used is that the coach could be used as motivation for the performers. For example, in children's football, if the coach used to be a good player, the children could look up to them, and then the children could be motivated to be like the coach. The coach could also be used to set a good example to the children. For example, if the coach doesn't shout at the ref, the players might also not shout at the ref because they want to be just like the coach. However, although there are positive effects, there are also negative effects. An example of this is if the coach used to play at a high level, they might expect a high skill level from the performers, and then be harsher if they don't meet the expectations of a coach. Although the coach could set a good example to the performers, they could also set a bad example, such as if the coach gets caught doing something illegal, such as drink driving, the performers might look up to them and they might be more likely to do it just because they are their role model. A role model would also have to be careful about their attitude, because if they respond badly to losing, they could set an example to the people who look up to them. The third role of a coach I'll be speaking about is if the coach is a trainer. A trainer is someone who could help athletes unlock their full potentials and learn a new skill. The positive effects of having a coach who is also a trainer is that they could help train the athlete in a specific part of their game. For example, if the coach trains people in shooting in football, they could help improve the athlete's shot. If the coach improves a certain aspect of a performer's game, they could also improve the athlete's game as a whole. For example, in tennis, the performer might have worked on a backhand shot and might now be able to hit a wider range of shots, and therefore they would be a better player. The trainer could also set goals for the performer. This would be most effective if they used the principle of SMART. to set their goals, and if they use performance goals for beginners and outcome goals for more experienced players. Performance goals would be most effective for a beginner because they would need to focus on the positives of the game, otherwise they might get disheartened and give up. Outcome goals would be better for more elite athletes because it would give them something to aim for and they will be able to handle losing. The SMART principle is that goals must be specific to the performer, measurable, accepted upon by both the coach and the performer, realistic and time-bound. An example of how these can be used in basketball is if the coach wants to work on their shooting. They could set themselves a goal based on their shooting. This would be specific. The goal would have to be measurable. For example, they could take 50 shots from a spot on the court before and after the shooting training. This way they can see how much they improved. The coach-trainer would have to agree upon the goal with the performer to make sure it is reachable and realistic. Finally, the performer would only have a certain amount of time in which to improve. For example, they could test themselves after 2 weeks to see how much they improved. A negative effect of being a coach-trainer is overtraining. An example of this is if the trainer makes the performer lift too much in weight training and they might injure themselves. The trainer would have to be sport specific, otherwise the performer wouldn't improve a lot. An example of this could be if the athlete is being trained in agility but they are a sprinter. The training would be pointless because sprinters don't need to change direction and therefore don't need high levels of agility. The coach-trainer would have specialisms, such as being a fielding coach in cricket. This could be a negative point if they teach the performers about batting, because they won't be as good as coaching as they would if it was fielding. The other negatives are that the coach must be able to keep up with the athlete and the training must be carried out correctly. The coach must be able to keep up with an athlete, because if the boxing coach can't take the boxer's punches, then they won't be able to train as the coach would just be getting hurt and therefore won't be able to help train the athlete. The training also needs to be done correctly, because if the training isn't carried out correctly and the performer uses the wrong technique, it won't benefit them and they could be at risk to injury. For example, if a boxer gets taught to punch with their thumb tucked into the hand, they could break their thumb and then won't be able to train. Finally, the last role of a coach is that they could be an innovator. An innovator is someone who introduces new methods, ideas or products to help the training and make it less tedious. They tend to be creative and use new ways to try and improve or monitor the athlete. A positive of having an innovator coach is that they are always thinking of new ways to monitor or train the performers. And the training isn't tedious, so the performers won't lose focus and will be more engaged in the training. An innovator might be better for younger children, because that is when the concentration of the performer is at its weakest, and they might get too bored and give up on learning the sport. An example of how the innovators might make the training more entertaining is by adding in more games and competitions. This is so the performers stay engaged with the coach and listen to what they are saying. However, having an innovator coach could also be a negative factor. This is because they might be too concerned about making the training fun, and then they don't use the most effective training. This means they won't improve as much. An example of how this is if a basketball coach wants to work on shooting, they might use a shooting contest to keep the performers interesting. But it might not be as effective as a drill involving shooting contested shots from the three-point line. An innovator might use new apps to measure the athlete's progress, or use new apps to help train the performer. The app might not be developed enough for the performer's liking. Also, if the innovator introduces a new app to the performer every training session, they might get bored of all the new apps and therefore they might lose focus, or the training might seem more tedious. Finally, the performer might be reluctant to try new things and might not approve of the new methods or gadgets being used and therefore not be as interested in the training.